I have been fortunate enough to do what I do for a living for, my gosh, it's coming up on my 30-year anniversary in March, doing my first ever Sports Center. Now here I am on a show with my own mug.
Still shining.
Coffee stain mug, I might add. And then for the last 23 years, my goodness, coming up on 23 years for NFL Network, I can't recall a more wide open National Football League season for the postseason. I can't recall a wilder regular season as well. I seem like to set a record in terms of our 11-year history of this show of coming on the air over the last 6 weeks saying that was the game of the year. No, that was the game of the year. No, this was the game of the year. And it only makes sense because the stakes rise as the regular season dwindles. And the way the regular season began with the Ravens on a Sunday night after a Philadelphia Eagles win over the Cowboys and a Chargers win over the Chiefs to start the season on a Thursday and on a Friday. And then on a Sunday night, the Ravens go into Western New York and seem to have the Bills dead to rights until they didn't. The Ravens on the final Sunday night of the year seem to have the Steelers dead to rights. That's what happens when you line up your steady rookie kicker from 40-plus yards away with no time left to win a football game. And then the most unpredictable season I can recall, wildest season I can recall, season chock full of games of the year that I can recall, ends with a wide right to send the Pittsburgh Steelers to the playoffs as the AFC North champions and the Baltimore Ravens home in a season in which the Ravens entered as a surefire Super Bowl candidate and the Pittsburgh Steelers entered the season of, well, let's see what Aaron Rodgers at age 41 turning 42 can do. And what we saw last night in the fourth quarter was game of the year type stuff because this was the first playoff game of the year. Well, going for the 1 seed or not is always fascinating. The NFC South was up for grabs on Saturday night for the Panthers, and it wasn't for the Bucs. If they won, which they did because they had to wait for Atlanta to spit their last breath with Raheem Morris as their head coach at Tampa in order for the Panthers to survive. This was the first playoff game of the year. And what we saw in that fourth quarter after Chris Boswell gave the Steelers the lead with 4:28 to go in the third quarter was something to behold, from Lamar Jackson turning into the Lamar Jackson of last year and the previous MVP years that we were waiting for Lamar Jackson to turn into this year, finally hit, escaping a couple of Pittsburgh Steelers to step through and find Zay Flowers for a 50-yard bomb to explode in Pittsburgh in the end zone was holy ass type moment. Mm-hmm. And just when you thought that would be a wrap because the Steelers offense couldn't do a darn thing through the first three quarters except kick field goals and overtake a Ravens team that fell asleep offensively after their first drive all the way to the fourth quarter, Aaron Rodgers marches down the field. And despite having problems with his helmet and needing to fire off every darn near last timeout they've got at their disposal to avoid delay of game penalties because they don't want to settle for another field goal down 4 after they didn't settle for a field goal with 1 second left on the clock in the first half, deciding to go for it rather than kick a field goal, only to get stopped and come away with 0 points at the end of the first half. They're going to go for it, and they did, and Kenneth Gainwell dashes into the end zone for a 2-yard run to take the lead again, only to have Lamar, a minute and 25 seconds later, find Zay Flowers behind the defense again, because he comes through the wash and somehow, some way, the Steelers' defense doesn't pick up on the most dangerous threat the Ravens have at the receiver position for a 64-yard score, only to give it back to Aaron Rodgers and have him come up with the go-ahead score to Calvin Austin because the Ravens slip on the turf in Acrisure, where the turf is never Acrisure for anybody, from defenders to pass blockers to pass rushers to, as we eventually would find out, it's never a sure thing in Acrisure when you're kicking. And the Ravens march down the field with a 4th and 7 at midfield. Lamar finding, of all people, Isaiah Likely to grab a catch to set them up for a game-winning field goal. The same guy who Ravens fans thought had the Steelers beat in their first game this year in the end zone, only to have a what looked like touchdown grab knocked away before he got his third football act foot down. Same guy is now got the Steelers on the precipice again, only to have Tyler Loop come out and miss the game-winning field goal with no time left. And that's the way the season ended for the Baltimore Ravens, and the regular season ended for all of us. Exhausted, felt like we did our cardio.
Right.
Unbelievable, leaving Lamar Jackson stunned that this season wound up a losing season, not just in terms of their overall record, but in terms of this winner-go-home game. By the way, the first ever of its kind in the history of the AFC North. Did you know that? There's never been a winner-take-all final regular season game in the history of this stout black and blue, if you will, division. This is what Lamar had to say afterwards.
You know what's the emotion, Jameson. Like, we did all that, man, to come up short, bro, you know? Devastating, furious, all type of, I don't know. I'm everywhere with it right now.
I mean, after you completed that last pass, it looked like this thing is, I mean, it's not over till it's over. But are you just still stunned right now?
Definitely stunned, man. Thought we had it in the bag. Man. I don't know what else we can do.
Well, what else can you do except try and find the words when you come up with a loss and you're the first quarterback in the history of the National Football League to throw multiple go-ahead fourth-quarter passing touchdowns of 50 or more yards and lose. That's what Lamar Jackson was last night. And he and Zay Flowers were the first quarterback receiving duo in NFL history to connect on 2 go-ahead fourth-quarter touchdowns of 50 or more yards in a single game. That's a first. And Derrick Henry ran for 126 yards, his 37th career game with over 125 such rushing yards, including the playoffs, breaking a tie for 5th most such games in NFL history, with Emmitt Smith trailing only Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, Walter Payton, and Eric Dickerson. And if I told you all of that stuff would happen and the Steelers would win the game, you would have told me you're out of your mind. But the Pittsburgh Steelers have some old war horses like Cam Hayward. That dude is playing at the top of his game with gray in his beard. T.J. Watt holding on to the side of his surgically repaired lung during this game, only to have a ball batted in his direction and him have the presence of mind in the middle of the wash of trying to sack Lamar Jackson to grab the ball out of the air and come up with the interception. And joining Julius Peppers is the only player since '82 with 9 career interceptions and 100 or more career sacks, coming after that 3-game absence due to a collapsed lung. That guy was out there with Highsmith and the rest of that defense in support of a run game that has Kenneth Gainwell grabbing a team-high 8 catches for 64 yards and Jaylen Warren coming up with 4.7 yards a clip. And then, of course, there's Aaron Rodgers, to whom one must give it up. Coming into this season, there was a ton of skepticism, and rightfully so. Certainly coming off of 2 years in New York, one completely lost due to an Achilles, another year completely lost due to it being him coming off of the Achilles and the Jets being the Jets. Putting it all together, he was what appeared to be a Hail Mary attempt for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, as we all know, waited quite a long time for Rodgers to clear himself of his mind, his body, and of course, whatever was going on in his life to join the Steelers, to the point where the guy who he strode off the field with Mike Tomlin every single year, remember Cam Hayward was like, hey, you don't want to join the Steelers, basically pound sand. Remember he said something like that? He didn't like the characterization of it post.
Yep.
And so Rodgers finally does join, makes every start except the one that you pretty much think prior to the season, he would say, that's the one game I don't want to miss outside of the Packers, would be at the Bears, okay? He makes every start, has them in position after the Ravens went on a 5-game win streak to beat the Ravens, go on a 3-game win streak of their own, and overcome the loss of DK Metcalf in the final 2 games of the year, because DK Metcalf loses his composure and mind with a blue-haired Lions fan who he knew when he approached him had it in for DK. And I don't want to say any more because I fear litigation. And on top of all of that, comes the responsibility of being a Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback in the era where Steelers fans have, maybe, I don't want to say collectively, but a large share of them, maybe the majority of them, but it feels like whenever I cape for this man, a majority of you don't like when I cape for Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
You're ready for the action of the Rooney family that you have been waiting for, because it's just not going to work. And at the end of the day, who are the champs of the AFC North? Who is coming into the playoffs off of his 9th division title of his first ballot Hall of Fame career? Who is making the 12th playoff appearance of his first ballot Hall of Fame career, tied with Favre and, yes, Big Ben, behind only Peyton Manning and Tom Brady all time? That would be Aaron Rodgers. And the reason why you go get him is exactly what we saw in the fourth quarter, and exactly what nobody thought we would see again in the fourth quarter of a winner-go-home game from Aaron Rodgers. That is to go 11 for 14 for 133 passing yards, a touchdown, and a passer rating of 130.1 with the season on the line. The 133 fourth quarter yards, by the way, the most for Rodgers in any quarter this season. He saved it for the last moment and for that play to Calvin Austin. This is him breaking it down. You tell me how many quarterbacks can break it down quite like this.
And multiple times in the huddle, I'm asking him on various plays, what do you want on the backside? What do you want on the backside? And he wouldn't give me a straight answer. And on this particular huddle conversation, I said, what do you want, Cal? He said, and somebody to my right, I don't know if it was McCormick or Pat, said something about like, man, just go cook him or something. So I said, all right, Cal, you run the hitch and go back there. And I was really thinking the front side 3-man combination that we worked and had success with most of the night was kind of my first thought. But I just peeked back to the left and saw number 3 slip, and it's a gimme touchdown. But I'm proud of Calvin, and the line really gave me a lot of time all day. They played really well.
That's Aaron Rodgers breaking it down. That's why you go ahead and get him, which is what Tomlin said after the game. And that is how the Steelers head into the playoffs. And I understand. I'm sure I know what you're thinking, maybe potentially what everybody's thinking. Hey, the kid from the Ravens should have made the kick. But at the end of the day, they were the ones that needed to come from behind to win it, because the Steelers took the lead late in a game, in a season, that a lot of people were skeptical could, period, happen at all. And they are going into the playoffs against a stout Houston Texans team coming into their house on Monday Night Football. I cannot wait for all of that. But got to give it up. Pittsburgh Steelers get it done in a game of the year. Again, Rodgers doing what he did in the fourth quarter, overcoming, may I repeat again, a future first ballot Hall of Fame running back doing what he did in Derrick Henry to the tune of 126 yards, and Lamar Jackson finding his MVP form just in time to throw 2 touchdown passes in the fourth quarter of 50 or more yards, and becoming the first quarterback in history to do it to lose. That's what's going on. Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.